Soy directora de una ONG que se llama Digital Femmes y trabajamos para defender derechos digitales con perspectiva de género. Entonces, hoy estoy muy contenta porque creo que tenemos mucha suerte de tener los panelistas y la panelista que han venido aquí. Ahora os los voy a presentar. Entonces, voy a explicaros un poco la dinámica. Vamos a presentar el impresionante currículum de las tres personas que están en el panel y van a presentar un deck, una presentación, cada uno de 25 minutos aproximadamente, 25, 25, 25, y luego pararemos, si nos da tiempo, 5 minutos de descanso y volveremos con preguntas. Las preguntas os pediría que las escribierais directamente en el chat a lo largo incluso de toda la conversación. O sea, si se os ocurren preguntas, podéis ponerlas en el chat para que no se os olviden y yo las recogeré y haré las ordenaré para que tengamos media hora de debate interesante. Entonces, ahora voy a presentar a nuestros panelistas. Lo voy a hacer en inglés por cortesía a las personas que no son de por aquí y estaré cambiando probablemente de idioma, si nos importa. Y nada, y empezamos ya. Entonces, hoy vamos a hablar de una cosa que me parece muy, muy interesante y estoy muy contenta. Yo estudié Derecho y creo que me apunté como vosotros a este curso de Derechos Humanos hace unos cuantos años y era justo cuando empezaba Internet, ¿no? A mí me explicaron lo que era el protocolo TCP/IP y me pareció una cosa marciana, increíble, que iba a revolucionar el mundo, que por fin teníamos una tecnología para el bien, para el bien común incluso, y que jurídicamente estaba todo por hacer, ¿no? Hoy, 21 años después, creo, vamos a hablar de exactamente cómo en esta era digital los derechos humanos están viéndose afectados, ¿no? Y cómo yo creo que las personas que han venido a hablar con nosotros hoy nos van a explicar desde sus puntos de vista cómo algunos de estos derechos fundamentales hoy están siendo challenged, están siendo retados, ¿no? O sea, tenemos que ver cómo avanzamos jurídicamente, cómo nos protegemos o cómo potenciamos los efectos positivos y limitamos o restringimos los efectos negativos de la tecnología, porque la tecnología que en sí mismo no es... O sea, no debería ser algo que generara efectos negativos, como no es neutra, todos lo sabemos, la tecnología no es neutra, porque hay personas que la diseñan, detrás de estas personas hay maneras de ver el mundo, hay ideologías muchas veces, y eso es lo que hoy yo creo que vamos a ver desde diferentes puntos de vista, ¿no? Sin más, porque yo aquí no... Vamos ya directamente a escuchar a nuestros ponentes, que como os digo, os los voy a presentar. El profesor Joe Cannataci.
Dime. Porque me parece que hay una cuestión con la interpretación. Si puedes apagar un segundo la interpretación, porque se solapa.
¿Apagar?
Sí, en la parte inferior.
Estoy apagada.
¿Sí? Vale.
¿Yo la tengo apagada? Sí.
Vale, pues ya está.
Gracias. Vale, uy, ¿qué estoy haciendo mal? Yo la tengo apagada la interpretación. Vale. Vale, pues no sé qué he hecho, pero lo siento a los intérpretes que están traduciendo. I'm very delighted to introduce you Professor Joe Cannataci. He was appointed in 2015 as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right to privacy for the first time. He is also the head of the Department of Information Policy and Governance at the Faculty of Malta, and he also holds the chair of the European Information Policy and Technology Law in the Faculty of Groningen, in which I studied 21 years ago. He's also an adjunct professor at the University of Australia in the Institute and the School of Computer and Security Science, and he has also coordinated important projects such as Smart and Respect projects dealing with surveillance and currently with the internet governance questions that we all have. His pioneering role in the development of technology law and especially privacy law has been key to the development of European information policy. Mr. Professor Joe Cannataci, you can start your presentation. Thank you very much.
Buenas tardes, hola, good evening. Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm extremely happy to be able to spend a couple of hours with you this evening. It's after 6 o'clock. It's also time for a drink and perhaps a bit of tapas, or that would be a bit early, I know, in Spain, but hey. So you would permit me if I would be informal during my 25 minutes with you, and I will also try to relate to some of the people I see on the screen. And there are 61 participants this evening, but I can see immediately on my screen Diana and Sandra and Susana. So if I mention one or two of you as an example, please understand that the reason would be to try and get us to think about the human beings who human rights are all about. So I am going to share my screen, and this way you will see not me, but the PowerPoint presentation that I have prepared for this evening. Just a minute, there we are. Just a minute, I'm just trying to make sure that I can see everything here. Okay. Momentito, okay, there we are. Okay, so I would like to start off today, right, as we're going to discuss human rights in the digital age. Before you start thinking of human rights or privacy, or else, to mention a couple of subjects that I saw on the Institute website, privacy, big data, open data. And before we do that, right, I want you to think about privacy and the free development of personality, right? And as I promised, I'm going to choose 3, 4, 5 of us, the first 5 I see on the screen, right? So when we talk about personality, right, let's take Diana, right? Who is Diana? How did Diana decide to become who she is today? What about Sandra, right? What can we say about Sandra's personality or Susanna's personality, right? And if we're going to pick on Sandra for once, is Sandra who she is today because of the famous classical discussions on nature? Is it her genetic programming which has made her what she is? Is it nurture? Is it her family, her friends, the school, society around her? And to what extent does Sandra choose things about herself in order to become and remain Sandra? And is Sandra of today the Sandra of 3 years ago? And will she be the same Sandra 5 years and 10 years from now in the future? Because the most important thing, one of the most important things in life, I put it to you, is our freedom to decide who we are and in which direction we are going. Of course, that freedom is not an absolute one. It is limited by a number of constraints. But let's just look at this for a minute. So, of course, as the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Privacy, you would expect me to talk about privacy as a human right, and of course, in terms of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, in terms of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights of 1966, in terms of the European Convention on Human Rights, in terms of a lot more of international law on human rights. Privacy is a human right. It is a universal right, and it is a standalone right. But I want to challenge your thinking a bit today. Is it an end in itself? oh, I want to be private? Or is it a means to an end? And if so, to which end, right? And I think that this is very important when we think about technology and human rights. Because I want to suggest to you that privacy can conceivably be both an end in itself, but also a means to an end. And I would like to share with you my thinking that to a considerable extent, I see privacy as an enabling right for another right, for an overarching right. And this overarching fundamental right is the right to free, unhindered development of one's personality, right? So Diana is unique. She has a unique personality, but what makes that personality and to what extent has Diana used privacy to build her own personality? And there are 61 people or more now since the last time I checked with us this evening. And because we respect their privacy, we are not going to ask the question. But out of 61, 65 people, many of us have private lives. We have private and family lives. Some of us are heterosexual. Some of us are homosexual. Some of us are thinking in one way. Some of us believe in God. Some of us don't believe in a God. We all have various rights which we are practicing there. But taken together, the way we look at the development of our personality is, I put it to you, also dependent on this conceptualization. And here, very crudely, in this diagram that I'm showing you, I would like to, if you notice, I have put this crudely in the form of a stool with 3 legs, right? And the top is this overarching right, the right to the free and unhindered development of personality, which is not something which I have invented. It is to be found in the constitutional law of many countries, and most famously Germany, which has developed this right greatly since the census decision of the Constitutional Court of 1983. But if you notice, I've put this as a stool on 3 legs or a tripod on 3 legs. And I have put there 3 fundamental rights, which to my mind are the chief 3 information-related fundamental rights. I want you to think of society as a place where information is flowing all around us. And these information flows can be controlled, can be regulated, but they relate to us in different ways. Because I suggest to you that in order for us to be able to free development of our personality, we need a combination of these rights. There are times when we want to be private, when we want to control the information we give about what we are saying, what we are thinking, what we are doing. But there are times when we want to have freedom of expression. There are times when we want to express ourselves freely, and we want to receive ideas freely. And of course, then, a right which we find in many democratic societies, and that is the so-called right of freedom of information, which is the right of the citizen to access information held by the government normally in order to be able to see what kind of government is taking place, what is being done in your name or my name as a citizen. So I invite you to look at privacy in this context. And then I would also invite you to think about the way that history has been made at the UN. And here I am taking verbatim on this slide the resolution that was passed in March of 2017, which recognizes justice, recognizing the right to privacy also as an enabling right to the free development of personality. And in this regard, the UN is not talking of privacy alone, but it is noting with concern the link to any violation to the right to privacy in the way it affects other human rights, including the right to freedom of expression, to hold opinions without interference, the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. And let's stop for a minute. And unfortunately, I don't have the time this evening to go into all the different aspects of technology law and the way that human rights are affected. But I would want you to see, I've picked out some examples here from 2018, but I could go on 2019, 2020, the effect to which we are seeing an increasing number of countries with privacy and data protection laws. But I have some bad news for you, right? Which is, when you look at there are 193 member states of the UN. Approximately 60, that's a third, have no privacy law at all. Zero, right? Out of the remaining 133, they have something, one thing or another, but less than 70 have certain key fundamental characteristics. We consider that you can't really have an effective privacy law unless you have a truly independent data protection authority. So from 133, you quickly go down to 70, right? And if we go apart from, if we forget for a minute, normal GDPR style data protection law, and instead I were to ask you, how many countries have got laws which protect privacy by adequately and comprehensively regulating the use of domestic surveillance by domestic intelligence services or the police, and more than 80% of the UN member states don't have anything at all. So this is obviously a cause for concern for people like myself, whose mandate was created precisely in 2015 after the Edward Snowden revelations about surveillance. There are more gaps in the international legal framework, which I want to talk to you about today. If I am looking at my phone, it is not because I am not paying attention, but I want to be faithful to my friends and keep to my 25 minutes. And that is what is serving me as my watch today. So if you were to ask me, no country has a perfect law when it comes to detailed domestic surveillance, right, and domestic intelligence. And 75% of UN member states have no system of detailed safeguards, right? Happily for us, Spain is not only a member of the EU, but it is also a member of the European region of the Council of Europe, and it is precisely, right, in Convention 108, the Data Protection Convention of 1981, now modernized, we call it Convention 108 Plus, which has been got a new text approved as of the 10th of October of 2018. And Spain, under this regime, has pledged under Article 9 of Convention 108 and Article 11 of Convention 108 Plus. The rule for Spain is very simple. The rule for Catalonia is very simple. That when it comes to privacy, when it comes to the police, when it comes to national intelligence, when it comes to national security, if there are any privacy intrusive measures, they must, one, be provided for by law. They can't be arbitrary. Prévu par la loi in French, right? But they must also be necessary and proportionate in a democratic society. Every law must meet that test, the test of necessity and the test of proportionality in a democratic society. In times of COVID, I don't really feel like spending too much time on bad news, but there's lots of bad news out there, right? I could tell you about the Americas. I could tell you about only 7 states having ratified and signed the protocol for the regional court. But where still is Asia and the Pacific? If you look carefully at this chart that I've put up for you here, right, you will see that I have prepared a table for you here, which starts at the bottom with laws on interception of communications. Then we go to intelligence regulation and oversight. And that at the middle, you will see here the national level over here, right? National ordinary legislation. We go up one, and you see national constitutional law. You go up here, regional law, you hear global law. But as you start going to the right, the situation gets worse. So Europe, not bad, lots of room for improvement in every country, but overall, some marks or good marks for trying, right? The Americas, comme ci, comme ça, you have some privacy laws in place, you have some constitutional laws in place. Some countries like Argentina, like others, also have moved towards the concept of the free development of personality and its protection in constitutional law. But in reality, if you were to ask me, am I happy with the oversight laws of most of the countries in North America and South America? And the answer is plainly no, right? They need to get their act together in order to modernize laws, especially those with surveillance. As I go more to my right and your right, Africa is even worse off, and Asia is the worst off. As a Spanish citizen, Diana, Sandra, Thais, if they are not happy with a decision of the Spanish court, at least they can go to the regional court and take the Spanish government to court and say, look, I'm sorry, but you're interfering with my privacy or my freedom of expression. Try to do that if you live in Australia. Try to do that if you live in Malaysia. And I'm mentioning countries which are relatively democracies. I didn't tell you try to do that if you live in China, right? What on earth are you going to do if your government is not properly respecting these principles which I have been mentioning? Let's go on a bit and see some of the recent things, right? So we have had some very interesting decisions coming out of the European Court of Human Rights, especially in 2018, in Red Visa versus Sweden and Big Brother Watch and others against the UK, which dealt with bulk interception and dealt with intelligence sharing. I don't have the time to go into them today. I could spend 2 days just talking about those 2 cases alone, but they certainly make a lot of interesting work. I'll just conclude today by letting you know, and then feel free to ask as many questions as you want. I'll just tell you about some of the work that I have been doing inside the UN to try and promote these. So one of the things which I did immediately was tackle, so I set up, I chose 5 priorities, which I'll tell you about now, and I set up 5 thematic task forces by basically asking people all over the world who are experts in the field and kind enough to give me their time for free, because as you know, the UN has no money, certainly for people like us. And we held consultations online, but also in person. And I presented 2 reports, one in 2017 and the other in 2018, on the notions of big data and open data. Please, if you have the opportunity, I understand Diana might have put some of these in the resources that you have, these recommendations. Big data and open data is a big problem, right? We also worked hard on health data. Another priority that I dealt with was health data, and within a task force which was chaired by Professor Nicolaus Forgo, we not only held an online consultation, but also a consultation which was co-organized at the Council of Europe in Strasbourg in June of 2019, and I presented the recommendations to the UN General Assembly in October of 2019. Another subject very close to my heart is gender and privacy, right? And I presented in the after a consultation in New York, first version of the report was published in March 2019, and the final version of the recommendations were published in March 2020. When it comes to security, one of the things I have done is set up the International Intelligence Oversight Forum, where I tried to get everybody in one room to discuss what intelligence oversight agencies are doing. This was the first one in the Parliament in Bucharest in 2016, Parliament Brussels 2017, the Parliament of Malta in 2018, Lancaster House London 2019. You guessed it, 2020 was, and 2021 have been COVID, so we haven't been able to meet. But essentially, that's Lancaster House in London. I've also carried out a number of country visits. I encourage you to read the reports on these 6 country visits from all over the world: France, UK, Germany, Argentina, South Korea. This is in Germany, in fact. You can go to my website where you can see this work on these priorities, a better understanding of privacy, security and surveillance, big data and open data, health data, personal data, held by corporations. I could go on. I could talk a lot about big data, privacy invasions, etc., and the golden age of surveillance. I would love to tell you about what happened when the Australians really got a bad idea and published online everybody's medical data. Imagine, Thais, you know, Diana, that if you were one of those 10% of people in Australia whose medical history for 30 years was published online, every visit to the gynecologist, every visit to the pharmacy, everything you bought at the pharmacy, every visit to the doctor, everything was online and unfortunately leaked. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop here for now. I could go on for much longer, but I think it's only fair to respect time. I'm also looking forward to listening to my colleagues on the panel and to you, dear colleagues, who will be then intervening with questions from the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Cannataci. It's super interesting. I have already, I don't know how many questions written down for the discussion moment with the audience. So happy to listen more about what are the issues regarding these 5 working groups or big issues that you have prioritized. And let's see, we have time later. And now we have the pleasure, I have the pleasure to introduce you to Edson Prestes. He's also a professor. We have all doctors in our panels, so that is a very important detail. Edson is a professor at the Institute of Informatics at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. He's also the leader of the FI Robotics Research Group and the CNP Research Fellow. He received his bachelor in computer science from the Federal University of Pará and the PhD in computer science from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. Edson is also a very busy person. He's meeting lots of different advisory boards, I would say. He's member of the IEE Robotic and Automation Society and the IEE Standards Association. And over the past years, he has been working in different initiatives related to the standardization of artificial intelligence, robotic, and in ethics, which is very much related to the privacy right that we all have, and how I think that his talk is going to be focused on how artificial intelligence is conflicting or not with basic fundamental rights such as privacy. Anyway, I'm shutting up my mouth. Edson is member of the UNESCO. He's an ad hoc expert for the recommendation of ethics and artificial intelligence. He's member of the United Nations Secretary's General High-Level Panel on Digital Cooperation, and he's also a member of, for instance, the Future Society, advisor at the Carnegie AI and Equality Initiative at Carnegie Councils for Ethic International Affairs, member of the UNESCO IP Information Accessibility Working Group, and many other memberships. I am going to let Edson to explain us his main views about artificial intelligence and the conflicts that we are facing today when we talk and use artificial intelligence. Thank you. Edson, please.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank you so much for your kind invitation. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I will share my screen. I have a presentation. Just a minute, please. I hope you are seeing my presentation. That's okay? Amazing. So before I start my presentation, I'd like to say that I'm involved with technology since 1993, when I joined the Bachelor of Computer Science. So since then, I've been working in different domains in computer science, like robotics, artificial intelligence, and the different subdomain of computer science. Around 5 years ago, I met the domain of ethics of artificial intelligence. And at that moment, I realized that my formal training was incomplete. Because at that point, I realized that only in her situation, I reflect about the potential negative impacts of the society, of technology in the society. And since then, I've been deeply involved in different efforts on ethics of artificial intelligence, and recently in human rights in the digital age. So today I will make a presentation about the efforts that I'm directly involved. As an enthusiast of technology, I can see clearly how technology, AI-based technology in robotics itself, digital technology in general, can bring benefits for humanity. I can see clearly this. I can see robots being used to deliver goods, robots to be used to fight isolation, depression, being used to create a business, and so on. In fact, I wrote with my colleagues how AI and robotics can be used to attain the Sustainable Development Goals. If you want, I can send this paper for you all. And in that paper, we propose we provide some examples about how AI and robotics can be used to map poverty through big data analytics, can fight hunger through precision farm, can be used to support the creation of preventive, predictive, cognitive, personalized healthcare models, can support better education, and so on. So I'm very enthusiastic. Although I'm very enthusiastic, I totally understand how this technology can impact our lives. One of the first points that we need to understand is AI can permeate all aspects of our lives. Since the way that we raise our children, to the way that we take a decision, receive information, interact with the environment. Today, you can see a lot of ethical implication, like loss of privacy, we had the discussion previously. Environment degradation is a very important point, because if you have a proliferation of a computational system, this system will be built from some rare materials extracted for the environment. If you use all the potential of, for instance, blockchain technology, you increase the global temperature in 1 or 2 degrees. we can see some examples where the systems are discriminated, are being sexist. If you do not, if the countries are not prepared for the digital age, you increase the social gap. People are losing the ability to interact with other people. So what we are seeing is like a stimulation of objectification of a human relationship. That's the reason why, in some cases, we have the proliferation of hate speech. We have some life and death decision made by machines, and not only in the little autonomous weapon systems, but also in the medical domains. So we have a lot of ethical implication, and now we are only in the very beginning of this domain, in the digital age. So that's the reason why at that moment you need to make a strong reflection about the ethical implication. You try to create some regulations, try to create some compass for people that work with technology, try to develop AI-based technology in a responsible way. That is so important that the largest technical association established the initiative on ethics of autonomous intelligent system. This initiative, it was established for 5 years ago, and we published a very nice book called Ethically Aligned Design. This book was written by around 200 members from different segments of society with different technological, different backgrounds. So we have people from the sociology, from the legal domain, from engineer, all of them sit together and discuss how to regulate the technology, what are the implications of human rights, how we can create technology that are sustainable, and so on. Some of the issues that are discussed in this document are how we can ensure that autonomous intelligent systems don't infringe upon human rights. How can we assure that design, manufacture, owner, and operator are responsible and accountable, that are key for us? The relevance of this force was recognized by IEEE, that released in 2019 this letter, the support letter that supported the inclusion of ethical consideration in the design and deployment of autonomous intelligent systems. Observe that we are talking about the largest technical and academic society that congregate all people, all experts that are involved in the engineer domain. From this initiative, several standardization initiatives were established to focus on different aspects of the AI domain, like transparency of autonomous system, algorithmic bias, standard for child and student data governance. I'm a chair of the working group called the P7007, Ontological Standard for Ethically Driven Robotics Automation System. In this standard, we intend to create a standard ontology that can guide the development of ethically driven robotics automation system. We intend to publish this standard during this year. So here we have as an output of this working group soft laws that are very important for the government to create some policies that are important for manufacturing to guide the development in a responsible way of the AI-based system, and so on. From the multilateral organization that I'm also involved, in 2018, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres established the high-level panel on digital cooperation to propose ways to strengthen cooperation at the global level in the digital realm. Observe that when we are talking about the digital technology, we are talking about AI, because digital technology receives data, processes data, and outputs data. Everyone wants to make profit from the data that are collected. They want to make profit from the profile that they are enlisting for the human patterns behavior. So When you think about the digital technology, we are talking about AI, we are talking about robotics, and so on. So this panel was co-chaired by Melinda Gates and Jack Ma, and I was a member of this panel together with a stellar team like Jean Tirole, Nobel of Economics Science, Vint Cerf, the father of the internet and also Turing Award, Doris Leuthard, former president of Switzerland, and so on. And we did a lot of meetings. We did a lot of consultation in locals. We visited some cities and so on. And we elaborated a very nice document called The Age of Digital Interdependence. So we discussed the global digital cooperation, but we discussed also in which domains the cooperation is fundamental. And in this document, we have some 5 recommendations, usual recommendations, because we have some recommendation inside that focus on digital economy and society, human institutional capacity that is essential, because we need to capacity not only the population, but also the government about how to address the issues coming from the digital domain, human rights and human agents, digital trust, security, and stability. I will make a reference only to two the recommendations that we have. Only it's about the recommendation 3A, where we urge the UN Secretary General to institute an agency-wide review of how existing international human rights accords and standards apply to new emerging digital technology. That is very important for us. For instance, as I mentioned to you, I'm involved since 1993 with technology. Only recently, I realized that my formal training was incomplete because I did not have the formal training on how to reflect about the social implication, the ethical implication of the technology in the society. So we do not have the training for that. And for us, human rights seems to be very abstract. It's very difficult to think about each principle in the human rights. And you have several accords, covenants, and so on regarding human rights to the digital technology. That is not clear. Another point, it's about the artificial intelligence per se, where we believe the autonomous intelligent systems should be designed in ways that enable the decision to be explained and human to be accountable for their use. That also is the key for us, because artificial intelligence are just systems. So artificial intelligence do not know, are not a person, do not have the same capability, cognitive capability of the person. So in terms of human rights, for us, it's very important to see what is the meaning, for instance, of this principle. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Everyone has the right to life, liberty and security of prison, of person. No one should be subject to torture and cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment. How can we map this principle to the digital way? That is not direct. Let's think about our situation currently. We have a physical body. We are a person. But observe that all of us has what you used to call digital twins, a digital person. If someone has the digital person, a company has the digital person, are you free? Observe that the digital person tends to be a kind of a replication of your behavior, of your desire that are extracted from the data that you provide in the different sites that you visit. You do not have a control of this data that are being collected. You do not even have if this data are correct. So are you really free? When you think about the right to life, When your assistance or medical assistant are declined because you do not provide the correct data to receive a specific treatment or service from the government, your right to life are being denied. Or when a machine kills you, when you have the proliferation of fake news, okay, are you subject to a degraded treatment or punishment? So it's necessary to make this reflection. It's necessary to collect this example. It try to generalize this example, not only to the system that exists today, but to the future system. I remember that one of my discussion in this panel, it was in the direction to propose a new human rights declaration, but it's specific for the digital domain. Because at that moment, you can see clearly, I can see clearly the mapping of this principle to the digital domain based on the system that exists today. But we do not have, we do not know exactly what are the creativity of the human beings and what are the system that will be created in the near future. Our report, when it was delivered in 1919, the Secretary General established several roundtables to address all of our recommendations. So you can see here on the right the organization that are involved in the discussion of the human rights recommendation. We have the Government of the Republic of Korea, European Union, Access Now, and so on. And also, it was very interesting because in the end, the proposal, it was to the development of a system-wide guidance on human rights and due diligence impact assessment. All this output appears in the roadmap for digital cooperation. The importance of making this reflection about the human rights in the digital age also appears in the call to action for human rights released by the UN Secretary General Office. And here we have some action, concrete action related to the privacy, related to the UN guidance principle on business and human rights, focus on the digital domain. The importance of the discussion of digital technology, and in particular in the human rights, appears in the Declaration on the Commemoration of 75th Anniversary of United Nations, where the member states assume the compromise to improve digital cooperation. They recognize the profound impact of digital technology on people's rights, and also recognize that this digital technology has the potential to be misused by the people that develop the technology. As we can see as a spin-off of this efforts lies on the UNESCO efforts that is elaborating the very first global normative instrument on ethics of AI. I'm deeply honored to be part of this group that developed the draft of the recommendation. Is a draft because we created the first version. Now this first version is under intergovernmental negotiation. The objective of this recommendation is to provide a universal framework of values, principle, and action to guide the state in the formulation of the legislation, policy, and other instruments regarding AI. It to guide action of individuals, groups, and communities to ensure the embedding of ethics in all stages of the AI life cycle, to promote the respect for human dignity and gender equality, and to foster multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary, and pluralistic dialogue. So we have a very ambitious recommendation, and this recommendation it was grounded on human rights. So we took into consideration the human rights is existing instruments to elaborate all this recommendation. So for us, I will not enter into the details of the values and principles, Okay, but if you want, I can send this document to all of you. Okay, you can download from the unesco.org/artificial intelligence. So we focus the values on respect, protection, promotion of human dignity, human rights, fundamental freedoms, environment and ecosystem flourishing, ensure diversity, inclusiveness, and living in harmony and peace. In terms of principles that articulate these values, we have a proportionality and do no harm, safety and security, fairness and non-discrimination, sustainability, privacy, human oversight and determination, transparency, explainability, multi-stakeholder adaptive governance and collaboration, responsibility and accountability, awareness and literacy. In the policy areas that focus our recommendations, the policy actions properly, we elaborated we group a recommendation on these policy areas. Focus on data policy, environment, ecosystem, gender, education, research, health and social well-being, ethical governance, state worship. I will show some examples of this recommendation, okay? We have a lot of recommendations. I think more than 100 probably, okay? So some of the recommendations are shown in this slide, where we understand that the member states should introduce impact assessment to identify and assess benefit and concern and risk of AI system. The ethical impact assessment should identify impacts on human rights, in particular, but not limited to the right of vulnerable people, labor rights, environment, ecosystem. And member state and private sector companies should develop due diligence and oversight mechanisms to identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for how they address the impact of AI system on human rights, rule of law, in inclusive society. Another set of recommendations we have here, we say that member states should ensure that any AI governance mechanism is inclusive, transparent, multidisciplinary, multilateral, and multi-stakeholder. And the member states should put in place mechanisms to require AI actors to disclose and combat any kind of stereotyping, and do not foster cultural, economic, social inequality, prejudice, and spread of non-reliable information. Another recommendation is member states should put in place appropriate safeguards to recognize and protect individuals' fundamental right to privacy. Member states should assess the direct and indirect environment impact through the AI life cycle. Another recommendation that is very important for us is member states should ensure that the potential of AI system should be used to improve the gender equality. It should guarantee that this technology does not contribute to exacerbate the already wide gender gaps. We focus also our attention to literacy, that is very important, to reduce digital divide and digital access inequalities. We focus on empower the students in the wide range of core and interdisciplinary skills. Skills like learn how to learn, communication, critical thinking, and so on. And also, member states should endeavor to employ effective AI systems for improving human health and protect the right to life, and to ensure that the deployment of AI in healthcare be consistent with international law, international human rights law. So the idea of a medical system decide if you have UTI treatment or UTI should not delegate exclusively to machines. And also member states should establish research on effective regulation of potential harm to mental health like depression, anxiety, and so on. Currently, the UNESCO received the comments from the member states, and now the UNESCO we established several intergovernmental meetings in the end of April to negotiate this document. If you want to watch this negotiation, please visit this link. The idea is that the final report after the negotiation be adopted by the UNESCO in November this year. So if you want to download this document, you can send me an email or you can access this link. Thank you so much for listening. I hope I will not pass too much my time. Thank you.
Me parece que Thais ha tenido un problema de audio. No sé si está escribiendo en el chat que bueno, se ha intentado... Bueno, nos estás escuchando, Thais, ¿no? Many thanks, Edson. Bueno, no sé qué ha pasado. Creo que ahora va a intervenir Eurídice con la presentación.
Hola. Espero que Thais esté bien. Thais, danos una señal en algún momento de que estás bien. Y bueno, ya que no tengo presentación por parte de Thais, pues me voy a presentar yo. No pasa nada, yo me presento muy bien también. Soy Eurídice Cabañas, soy codirectora de Arts Games, que es una organización internacional que trabaja en la transformación social a través del videojuego desde hace más de 13 años. Y además, pues bueno, doy clases en distintas universidades en España y México, donde me encuentro ahora. Y bueno, básicamente os voy a hablar un poco de derechos digitales. Espera que comparto. Ok. Deberíais estar viendo mi presentación ahora. Si alguien no la está viendo o hay algún problema, por favor, decídmelo de voz, porque no puedo ahora mismo ni mirar el chat ni veros a vosotros teniendo la presentación abierta. Entonces, bueno, como digo, voy a hablar un poco de los derechos humanos en el mundo digital y el mundo digital. Habitualmente se habla del mundo digital como contraposición al mundo físico y no me gusta esta distinción porque en realidad están tan tremendamente imbricados que es prácticamente imposible el desligar el uno del otro, ¿no? No son dos mundos separados y se afectan el uno al otro constantemente. Voy a tomar algunos de los derechos humanos y voy a hablar un poco de alguna selección de estos derechos humanos y cómo se transforman o qué problemáticas hay dentro de los entornos digitales. Como digo, teniendo también en cuenta mucho su impacto sobre el espacio real. Tenemos como derecho humano que nadie será sometido a esclavitud ni a servidumbre. Pues bien, si hablamos un poco de esta materialidad de los medios digitales, que muchas veces se obvia, podemos encontrar que una de las cosas que son requisito necesario e imprescindible para poder conectarnos son los dispositivos, las tabletas, computadoras, los teléfonos, todo que necesita materias primas y que necesita de la extracción de estas materias primas. Habitualmente todo esto se invisibiliza bastante, incluso con la propia terminología que estamos utilizando para referirnos a los espacios digitales. Cuando pensamos en el espacio digital, lo primero que nos viene a la mente, y no es casualidad porque lo han puesto ahí, es la nube. La nube parece un espacio inmaterial, inocuo, que flota quién sabe dónde y no tiene espacialidad ni dimensiones. Pero esa nube son servidores, son grandes centros de datos, son cables que recorren todos los océanos por el mundo para conectarnos y son estos dispositivos a través de los cuales nos conectamos. Entonces, uno de los derechos humanos que se está incumpliendo tremendamente y que se está invisibilizando dentro del mundo digital es el derecho a no ser esclavo, a no estar trabajado en condiciones de migrantes. En la República Democrática del Congo es donde encontramos el 80% de las reservas mundiales de coltán. Ruanda, que es el país vecino, es el segundo exportador del mundo, pero no cuenta con nada de mineral en el suelo. ¿De dónde lo saca? De una guerra abierta por los recursos que ya se ha cobrado 6 millones de muertos hasta la fecha. La UNICEF ha denunciado que hay más de 40.000 menores trabajando en las minas, en condiciones de esclavitud, en condiciones tremendamente precarias. Cada kilo de coltán que se extrae equivale a la muerte de 2 niños esclavizados en un entorno en el que el promedio es de un minero muerto al día. Creo que es muy importante llamar la atención sobre esta materialidad, que seguiremos en los siguientes derechos también, pero quizá este sea el más fuerte. Toda persona tiene derecho a la privacidad, la honra y la reputación. Bueno, este es un derecho del que ya han hablado mis compañeros de mesa, pero pues analicémoslo un poco más, qué es lo que está sucediendo con este derecho en el entorno digital. Estamos alcanzando un punto que Kinnan denomina la singularidad de la intimidad, que quiere decir que una corporación conoce más sobre mí que lo que yo conozco sobre ella, muchísimo más. Porque imaginemos un ejemplo. Si yo pregunto a cualquiera de vosotros, ¿cuándo tuviste tu último orgasmo? O ¿cuál fue tu ruta exacta, minuto a minuto, hace 2 días? ¿Dónde estuviste en cada momento durante hace 2 días? O si yo pregunto, ¿qué compraste en el supermercado hace una semana? Puedo preguntar un montón de cosas que seguramente ninguno de vosotros querría responder. Y os parecería incluso insultante que yo os esté preguntando eso, que yo quiera saber esa información sobre vosotros. Pero resulta que esa misma información la estamos compartiendo. Eso ya lo saben las empresas. Porque muchas veces cuando pensamos en la privacidad o en la intimidad, pensamos en datos que estamos compartiendo, información que estamos compartiendo a propósito de esa foto en bikini que subimos el otro día y que quién sabe dónde acabe, de que el otro día compartí en la red que estaba en un lugar y entonces ya el mundo lo sabe. Pero no estamos teniendo en cuenta toda la información que estamos compartiendo de formas no deseadas, de formas en las que simplemente caminando con el móvil en el bolsillo ya saben exactamente todos nuestros recorridos, estamos básicamente monitoreados las 24 horas del día y poniendo nosotros mismos los instrumentos para nuestra propia vigilancia. Los metadatos que están en las imágenes que subimos, caminar con el móvil en el bolsillo, las tarjetas de puntos, todo eso se va sumando y se va sumando y hace una gran bola, que es un perfil de datos que es permanente, que va aumentando y que se va vendiendo de unas empresas a otras. Es decir, que quizá podría pensar que pues, Facebook sabe quiénes son mis amigos y mi banco o la empresa en la que trabajo pues tiene otros datos de mí, pero esos datos se cruzan y van aumentando más todos estos perfiles de datos. Estos perfiles de datos es importante el hecho de recalcar su existencia y hacernos conscientes de su existencia, porque no es solo una huella digital que estamos dejando o no es solo como un avatar que existe en el mundo digital y no impacta en el mundo físico. Estos perfiles de datos impactan y mucho en el mundo físico, permitiendo, quizá en los sistemas en los que más se ha implementado esto, como el crédito social chino, que podamos acceder o no a ciertos lugares, que podamos entrar o no al transporte público o a un teatro, pero también van a determinar o están determinando actualmente si nos conceden o no una hipoteca, por ejemplo, o un préstamo, si somos derivados o no a un tratamiento médico, si somos arrestados o no, en función también de muchos de estos perfiles de datos y del reconocimiento facial de las cámaras de vigilancia que cada vez más pueblan nuestras calles. Están tomando muchas decisiones, impactando muy fuertemente sobre nuestra vida y nuestras opciones futuras. Como digo, esto es una singularidad de la intimidad, porque las empresas, las 4 grandes empresas que aglutinan prácticamente toda la información y toda la infraestructura de Internet, tienen toda esta información no solo de mí, sino de todos vosotros, es decir, de todos. Ya ni siquiera es que conozcan exactamente todos los detalles sobre mí, sino que pueden cruzar toda la información, con quién me relaciono, extraer mucha más. Y yo ni siquiera sé qué información tienen mía, no puedo saber ni siquiera qué saben de mí. Sus algoritmos son cerrados, son privados, no podemos acceder a ellos, no podemos saber nada de lo que está sucediendo, no podemos saber cuáles son los flujos de esa información, para qué se está utilizando. Esto se relaciona directamente con otro derecho, que es que toda persona tiene derecho a la educación y al libre desarrollo de la personalidad. Ya en la primera participación se ha hablado un poco de que la privacidad o la importancia de la privacidad está muy vinculada con esto. Ahora veremos un poquito más. En general se está dando una privatización encubierta de un montón de servicios públicos, es decir, el derecho a la educación, que es un derecho que tiene que estar garantizado para todos y todas las ciudadanas, ha empezado a dejar de ser progresivamente un derecho, algo que se ha visto tremendamente amplificado a raíz de la pandemia. Cuando las clases han dejado de ser en la infraestructura pública, cuando las clases han dejado de ser en un espacio público donde el Estado garantizaba que estuviese el espacio en el que se sucedían esas clases, que estuviese la conexión eléctrica necesaria, la conexión a Internet, las mesas, los pupitres, los profesores, todos los dispositivos que fueran necesarios para la labor docente. Se han privatizado o ha pasado a que dependan de que las familias dispongan de esos lugares, dispongan de un cuarto propio en el que estar teniendo las clases, que no siempre se da, que dispongan de conexión eléctrica, que dispongan de conexión a Internet, que dispongan de un dispositivo por cada persona que tiene que estar conectada en la educación o en el trabajo, porque también los padres, madres teletrabajan. Son un dispositivo por persona en la casa. Y que dispongan además, o sea, toda la infraestructura que antes era la escuela, donde se garantizaban los derechos de los estudiantes mientras estaban en la escuela, donde no se deja entrar extraños, no se deja filmar a los estudiantes. Todo eso ha pasado a ser, por ejemplo, en la gran mayoría de los casos, Zoom. ¿Qué sucede cuando millones de menores que no tienen derecho, no tienen permiso por cuestiones legales de tener cuenta en Facebook, por este extractivismo de datos? Se sabe ya que Zoom vende los datos a Facebook. ¿Qué sucede cuando estos menores que deberían estar protegidos en un derecho básico que es el de la educación, en lugar de estar siendo protegidos, están siendo robados y almacenados todos estos datos, con lo que veíamos antes del impacto que pueden tener todos estos perfiles de datos, ¿no? Además de estar dotando de toda esta información de nuestros menores a los que ya no estamos protegiendo, estamos delegando todos los procesos cada vez más de inteligencia, como veíamos también en inteligencia artificial, a estos algoritmos que controlan muy pocas empresas, porque solo son las empresas privadas las que tienen la infraestructura como para almacenar esta ingente cantidad de datos, este Big Data, y tienen los algoritmos sofisticados como para analizarlo, ir aprendiendo, ir creciendo, ir tomando estas decisiones. Eso también supone que en muchos casos decisiones públicas, decisiones que deben ser de los gobiernos estatales, están siendo de empresas como Amazon. Decisiones como quién es arrestado o no por el reconocimiento facial de las cámaras de vigilancia. Decisiones como a qué colegio van tus hijos. Todas estas decisiones están siendo tomadas por algoritmos privados. Toda persona tiene derecho a participar directa o indirectamente en el gobierno de su país. Este es otro de los derechos humanos que, vinculado un poco con lo que veíamos anteriormente, también se ve muy afectado con la irrupción del mundo digital. Todos sabemos, y no me voy a detener aquí, la posibilidad de manipulación de la opinión pública y del voto, como se ha dado en los casos de Cambridge Analytica, del Brexit, donde manipulando la intención de voto de las personas más vulnerables a esta manipulación, cambian resultados electorales. Donde las decisiones de a quién se vota o a quién se elige ya no son libres, ya no hay una democracia sana, sino que tienen más poder estas grandes transnacionales que los gobiernos de muchos países. Pero además, si pensamos que ya no solo somos ciudadanos de nuestro país, sino somos ciudadanos también digitales, si pensamos en el entorno digital como un país más, lo que tenemos tampoco es una decisión, no es un gobierno en el que se puedan tomar decisiones directa o indirectamente sobre cómo se regula ese espacio, porque los que tienen la gran parte de espacios digitales online imponen sus reglas, imponen la moral dominante, pues tienen la posibilidad de expulsar a miembros sin ningún tipo de explicaciones, tienen la posibilidad de censurar lo que se pone o no en sus redes. Esto, la imposibilidad de una democracia en el espacio físico y la imposibilidad de una democracia en el espacio digital, junto con lo que veíamos antes de cómo los algoritmos que pertenecen a empresas privadas están tomando decisiones públicas, nos llevan también a la gobernanza algorítmica, que es esta forma en la que las 4 grandes empresas toman decisiones sobre todos los aspectos de nuestra vida, sobre qué información es relevante y cuál no, qué cosas existen o qué no, porque ya sabemos que lo que no está en Internet no existe. Cuando buscamos, es Google quien decide lo que existe y lo que no, y lo primero que vemos, la relevancia de la información. Los amigos con los que nos relacionamos los decide Facebook, los decide Twitter. Las personas con las que podemos establecer relaciones las establece Tinder. Y así, con todos los ejemplos también puestos de gobernanza de cuestiones públicas también tomadas por algoritmos privados. Esto es tremendamente importante, pero digo, una vez destacados como estas problemáticas, me gustaría irme un poco hacia mi terreno, que como os he comentado al iniciar, pues es el mundo de los videojuegos. Podéis ver en la presentación una cita que extraje de la tesis de Aida Navarro, Play Space y Game Space, sobre los documentos desclasificados de la NSA, donde hablaban de que sin interrumpir sus actividades en el mundo físico, muchos espías americanos y británicos estuvieron haciendo sus actividades de espionaje en World of Warcraft y Second Life, en varios videojuegos. Y llegaban a la conclusión de que los espacios virtuales, los espacios de juego, eran un espacio de oportunidad. Esto es la NSA en 2008. ¿Sí? Podemos imaginarnos lo que ha avanzado todo el impacto o el trabajo de la NSA en el mundo de los videojuegos. Hablo de esto porque habitualmente cuando pensamos en derechos digitales, pensamos en inteligencia artificial, pensamos en privacidad, en redes sociales, o sea, estamos imaginando otros universos. Pero el videojuego, está siendo dejado de lado de la lucha por los derechos digitales. Incluso el propio Richard Stallman, padre del software libre, cuando estuvo en la fábrica digital en México dando una conferencia, a una pregunta que le hice precisamente sobre los videojuegos, respondió que no era importante que los videojuegos fueran el software libre, porque los videojuegos eran ocio, eran arte, pero no eran algo relevante en lo que fuera importante incluirlos en estas luchas. Bien, voy simplemente a desmentir el que no sean importantes. La primera imagen que estáis viendo es un tuit de Flavio Escribano que comenta: ayer hice una prueba en una clase de máster. Pregunté a los alumnos si sabían cuál de los 2 vídeos de un ataque de un AC-130 era de un videojuego y cuál era real. En casi todos los casos no supieron dar una respuesta adecuada. Os invito a hacer el ejercicio y saber si sabríais decir cuál es cuál. Se está dando cada vez más una videoludificación de lo real. Los videojuegos se utilizan para sistemas de guerra, tanto como para entrenar soldados como para interfaces también dentro de los ataques con drones. Incluso videojuegos como American's Army, que es un videojuego del ejército de los Estados Unidos, está haciendo propaganda para entrar en el ejército al tiempo que está entrenando a sus posibles futuros soldados, porque está dirigido pues también a un público desde infantil y juvenil. La videoludificación de lo real no solo se da en cuanto a la guerra, donde se están implicando muchísimo todas las prácticas militares y los videojuegos, porque desde un inicio estuvieron implicados. No olvidemos que el videojuego tiene un origen militar en la investigación de interacción humano-máquina, pero también en otros aspectos. En general, se entrenan muchísimas labores específicas utilizando simuladores similares a los videojuegos, como para cirujanos, pilotos y demás. También se están empleando los videojuegos, por ejemplo, para hacer crowdsourcing de distintas labores. Por ejemplo, hay videojuegos como Eterna, que genera ADN sintético en base a la colaboración de un montón de personas jugándolo a la vez. también eyewear, que están mapeando el cerebro a través de personas que están jugando a mapear el cerebro, es decir, estamos imbricando las relaciones de trabajo y juego. Se está haciendo cada vez más gamificación en la educación. Estas técnicas y estrategias sacadas de los videojuegos se están aplicando cada vez más en todos los factores de nuestra vida, aplicando también pues, lo que viene siendo un conductismo clásico o operante, según los casos, que nos manipula y nos guía. O sea, son estructuras que inician o se desarrollan mucho en los videojuegos, que luego se aplican en las redes sociales, que se aplican en el capitalismo de plataformas, a todas estas plataformas como las de Uber, Globo y demás, que nos dan estrellas, nos dan penalizaciones, nos exigen estar constantemente conectados, ¿no? También se habla mucho del extractivismo de datos en redes sociales, pero se habla muy poco del extractivismo de datos en videojuegos, donde los datos que pueden extraer de nosotros son aún mayores, porque no solo pueden tener como esos mismos datos que las redes sociales, sino que además pueden medir nuestras respuestas a estímulos en tiempo real. ¿Cuánto tardamos en reaccionar? Si reaccionamos mejor o peor con ciertos colores, ciertos sonidos, ciertos estímulos. Hay estudios en neuromarketing con videojuegos, en neuromarketing político con videojuegos, donde cada vez más el videojuego se está utilizando para medir las respuestas que en los estudios habituales de marketing no eran tan claras, porque igual tú preguntabas a un cliente si le gustaba más el refresco de un color o de otro y te decía algo que quizá no era cierto. Pero en estos casos se está sacando información que ni siquiera los usuarios de los que se está extrayendo son conscientes que saben. También en general la industria del videojuego está virando cada vez más hacia modelos free to play, que o bien lucran con el extractivismo de datos, o sea, no te venden el juego, venden los datos que tú generas cuando estás jugándolo, o bien te ofrecen compras dentro del juego de distintos elementos. Para poder optimizar este modelo de negocio, aplican patrones oscuros. ¿Qué quiere decir esto? Quiere decir estrategias que dañan al jugador o hacen que gaste más dinero del que quería o esté más tiempo en el juego del que quería, para beneficio de los diseñadores. Por ejemplo, todas las estructuras de pirámide social, de tener que invitar amigos para poder avanzar en el juego, o los tiempos para jugar. O sea, por ejemplo, ofrecer recompensas diarias, entonces tienes que conectarte cada día o la pierdes. Hay un montón de patrones oscuros. Si os interesa, os invito a visitar la página web derechoaljuego.digital. Hay una sección donde los recogemos y podéis ver, pues, analizar los juegos que estáis jugando para ver si son juegos que estáis jugando o son juegos que están jugando con vosotros. Pero claro, una vez dicho esto diremos, bueno, los juegos son horribles, es un espacio terrible, vamos a prohibir todos los juegos, quemarlos, romperlos. No. Los videojuegos, precisamente, es muy importante luchar por los derechos digitales en los videojuegos, porque, como decía la NSA, son espacios de oportunidad increíbles y se pueden utilizar para muchísimas cosas que pueden promover y pueden ayudar a los derechos humanos, a diferentes derechos humanos. Por ejemplo, Uncensored Library, si luego cuando descarguéis la presentación, si pincháis ahí tenéis un vídeo, no lo voy a poner por no extenderme demasiado. Es un espacio que se ha generado en Minecraft para la libertad de prensa. Es decir, muchos países tienen censura, matan periodistas, no permiten que se publiquen ciertas informaciones. En todos los países hay uno u otro tipo de censura, mayor o menor. Pero en todos los países se puede acceder a Minecraft. Entonces han creado un servidor que es accesible desde cualquier parte del mundo, donde cada persona puede entrar y puede leer todo el material censurado de todos los países del mundo, donde es un lugar para garantizar el derecho a la libertad de expresión, que es posible gracias a un videojuego. Justo en el otro extremo, también con Minecraft, tenemos Craftea, que es un proyecto de Arts Games, donde trabajamos en modelos de participación ciudadana, en toma de decisiones de consenso sobre el espacio urbano. Es decir, recorremos el espacio físico real y vemos cuáles son las problemáticas que presenta. Entrevistamos a personas, a la gente que transita por ahí, a las personas que viven ahí, las personas que trabajan ahí, y después hacemos propuestas de mejora del espacio que se consensúan con todos los participantes en los talleres. Trabajamos con un público infantil que habitualmente está excluido de la toma de decisiones, ni directa ni indirectamente porque no tienen edad para votar. Y les damos esta posibilidad de empezar a involucrarse con temas de decisiones sobre su propio espacio público que les rodea. Y como evidentemente no es fácil ponernos a plantar árboles y quitar asfalto en la vía pública, pues esto lo llevamos a cabo en Minecraft y después superponemos las imágenes sobre las imágenes reales y enviamos las propuestas a quien sea. Por ejemplo, si estamos crafteando la escuela, pues la dirección de la escuela; si estamos crafteando el barrio, pues quizá el alcalde de la ciudad. En el centro tenemos Juegos del Común, también un proyecto de Arts Games, donde trabajamos videojuegos ciudadanos con Open Data, donde revertimos un poco, si veíamos estos procesos como muy jerárquicos y desiguales de gobernanza algorítmica, donde de los ciudadanos se extrae toda la información y después se gobierna por algoritmos privados en base a todo. Este juego parte un poco de lo contrario, parte del Open Data del portal del Ayuntamiento de Barcelona, que es datos abiertos de la ciudadanía anonimizados, y genera una API también en código abierto que cualquiera puede descargar desde la página de Juegos del Común y utilizar como quiera, que permite utilizar Open Data en los motores de videojuegos, de forma que podemos crear videojuegos, como se hizo en los laboratorios ciudadanos al respecto, utilizando, o sea, que puedan estar accediendo a ese Open Data y podemos estar jugando con la información, comprendiendo la información a través de interactuar con ella. Estos son algunos ejemplos de algo que estoy investigando, últimamente estamos investigando dentro de Arts Games, que es la idea de contraponer una gobernanza lúdica a una gobernanza algorítmica. Es decir, si ahora una gran empresa toma decisiones en todo el mundo a través de los datos que extraen de nosotros, partamos de extraer nosotros, de nosotros generar nuestros propios datos, que los datos sean para quienes los generan y que podamos interactuar con ellos, porque evidentemente el Big Data es una forma, o sea, se llama Big Data porque ninguna persona es capaz de interpretarlo y trabajar con él, pero podemos poner el algoritmo a nuestro servicio. En lugar de estar extrayéndonos datos, puede permitirnos, porque el videojuego es el primer medio algorítmico por excelencia, puede permitirnos entender esos datos, interactuar con ellos y poner a prueba otros sistemas sociales, económicos, políticos, tomar decisiones colectivas, por ejemplo, en el barrio, de dónde va a ir la próxima parada del autobús, o si se van a poner árboles o no, un banco o dónde. Pongo, por ejemplo, como decisiones urbanas muy sencillas, pero podría servir también para tomar decisiones o establecer modelos, por ejemplo, de economía circular. De esto, aparte de Juegos de Común y Craftea, que ya son intentos como de tomar decisiones utilizando el juego como una herramienta, hay otra propuesta que se llama Game for Cities, que ya se ha puesto en práctica, justo la idea de diseñar políticas públicas a través de juegos implicando a toda la ciudadanía. Se ha puesto en práctica en varios países alrededor del globo con bastantes buenos resultados. Actualmente no hay ningún proyecto que aúne un poco todo y que sea como más global, pero creo que el potencial del videojuego como espacio de socialización, de toma de consensos y de puesta en práctica de sistemas distintos o de elementos o cambios estructurales dentro del espacio en el que vivimos, antes de llevarlo a la vida real, puede ahorrar también como muchos problemas en el proceso y puede ser mucho más justo y horizontal con todos. Para esto necesitamos varias cosas. Bueno, para esto y en general para todos los problemas que hemos estado viendo. Y con esto voy cerrando. Por un lado, reclamar el videojuego como procomún, porque una herramienta tan valiosa, tan poderosa, que está modificando la realidad y la contemporaneidad, juguemos o no, videojuegos nos está afectando, no puede estar solo en manos del interés comercial. Necesitamos que haya videojuegos que sean procomunes, que sean abiertos, con algoritmos auditables, con software libre, que podamos trabajar con ellos y compartir con ellos y que no jueguen con nosotros, sino que nosotros juguemos con ellos. Pero también, y como veíamos en especial en el caso de la educación, son imprescindibles infraestructuras y espacios públicos digitales. Es muy importante, como hemos estado viendo, que haya guías éticas sobre la inteligencia artificial, que haya regulaciones y normas sobre la privacidad a nivel europeo, bueno, a nivel mundial, es tremendamente importante, pero mientras el mundo digital esté regido por los intereses comerciales, no podremos ganar esa lucha. Por eso hay que reivindicar infraestructuras y espacios públicos digitales que puedan garantizar los derechos de sus ciudadanos. Y en general, creo que es imprescindible generar tecnologías situadas, tomando el concepto de Donna Haraway de conocimiento situado. Estas tecnologías situadas serían tecnologías que no son homogéneas y homogeneizadoras como las que tenemos ahora, sino que se adaptan a contextos, o sea, surgen de los intereses y necesidades específicas de una comunidad, de un colectivo, de un entorno, de un contexto, y se generan para cubrir esas necesidades. De forma que además, si compartimos y trabajamos software libre, podemos ir adaptando a las necesidades de cada uno y generar muchos tipos de tecnologías diferentes, interconectadas, que den respuesta a las necesidades nuestras y no a las necesidades de las grandes compañías. Y bueno, con esto no quiero extenderme más. En las preguntas podemos seguir charlando del tema. Game over, gracias por jugar y dejo la palabra a vuestras preguntas porque también me interesa mucho oíros.
Ay, qué bien, gracias Eurídice. ¿Se oye bien?
Sí.
Porque tengo dos dispositivos aquí para poder tener este gran debate que tanto me apetece además. Entonces, si os parece, podemos o parar ahora, que no sé si queréis parar 5 minutos, o abrimos el debate y casi con un cafetito o con unas tapas, como decía el profesor Cannataci, nos podemos aquí empezar a tener un debate interesante, lo que digáis, pero...
yo por mí ya, llevo carrerilla.
Carrerilla, ahora estás de subidón. Vale, pues venga, he recogido algunas preguntas, como he tenido este problema de gap, si no las repito cuando, porque me las he ido apuntando en otro documento aparte, he tenido que reiniciar el ordenador, etcétera, etcétera, pero si veis que no os he recogido vuestras preguntas, por favor, decídmelo por el chat y lo hablamos, ¿eh? A ver, hay una pregunta de José Antonio Suárez que hace a todos los ponentes. Entonces, yo creo que podríamos empezar dándoos la voz a cada uno de vosotros y respondiendo colectivamente esta pregunta. Y luego ya hay más preguntas específicas para cada uno de vosotros. Entonces, José Antonio, que también está por ahí, ahora yo voy a repetir tu pregunta, pero por favor entra en el chat a conversar si crees que no la estoy formulando correctamente. Dice, ¿estaréis de acuerdo conmigo que todo tiene su cara y cruz? Gracias a las tecnologías crece la brecha tecnológica, pero también podemos disfrutar de esta reunión. Así podríamos ver cosas, ahora empiezan aquí, así podríamos ver cosas positivas y negativas de todos los aspectos. La solución, como se ha dicho, será el control y normalizarlo, poner leyes y reglas. No sé si lo ven posible. So, I don't know if the translation has been already done, but I would give the word to Professor Cannataci and then to Edson and then to Eurídice.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for these presentations. I think I would like everybody to reflect, especially on the way that the artificial intelligence technologies that Edson was talking about and the other technologies described, the way they are going to mesh into our lives in a way where, however good we make the law, we need to be realistic, right? I mean, I will tell you about a couple of examples. If I myself, in March of this year, have published my own recommendations on artificial intelligence and privacy. And of course, like many other people, I advocate that there should be transparency of the algorithms, etc. Yes, which is fine, which is well and good if you have experts in AI to read the code, and even then, depending on the kind of AI system which we are talking about, if it is one which is very deeply embedded in neural networking, there is more of a black box effect in the way that the decision is being taken. So It's all very well to write a law. It's all very well to grant the subject the right to challenge the workings of the expert system, which will happen in a court of law with experts, etc. But in truth, 95% of humanity is not equipped intellectually in terms of training and AI. And speaking as here as somebody who started working in AI and working with fifth generation languages way back in the 1980s, it's just not feasible, right? So we must be careful that in the laws that we make, in the regulations that we make, that we are realistic, and therefore the safeguards, the level of safeguards which need to be installed before an AI-dependent system goes out into the market must be of a higher level. Because we don't have much time, I'd just like to remind everybody of the fact that most people, probably everybody in this seminar, in this roundtable tonight, probably is not more than 3 meters away from their mobile phone, right? And the amount of information that people are cleverly, unintentionally, and sometimes stupidly giving away about themselves is incredible. Without AI, the AI then just makes it even more easy to profile individuals and what they are doing. So I'll stop there for now because I'd like to listen to colleagues and see if there are any questions. But I would appeal for common sense and especially the duty of each and every one of us to be able to use each and every safeguard that there is, because we see far too many people simply ticking yes, yes, tick on the box, yes, 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 off we go. And then even the few safeguards that are available at law are not being used to their full extent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Edson, what is your point on this, on the question Jose Antonio made?
Would you mind of repeating the question because of the the connection?
Yes, of course. So and now I'm going to say it directly in English. Let's see if my translation level is good. He's asking you panelists that you may agree with him that everything has got two sides of a coin. And thanks to technology, there is a gap, no? So I mean, not thanks to technology, but the fact that technology is around us, there is as a consequence, a gap, a tech gap, but also we can enjoy this meeting right now. So his point is more about technology has positive and negative effects, and the solution, I guess, to minimize the negative effects would be controlling and normalizing it, trying to build rules and norms. And so the question would be if this is possible, how could we build this normative world or these normative regulations around tech, and how could this possibly give us a positive effect?
Thank you so much. That's a very interesting question. I believe the answer has different levels, because first we need to empower or educate people, because they are being exposed not to neutral technology. Technology are biased intentionally or non intentionally. So it's necessary to empower people to recognize when this technology are changing their habits, are changing their values, are violating their privacy. And also be careful about the perils of the digital technology. That is one point. Another point is to be engaged, be involved in the creation of soft laws, like technical norms, as I mentioned before, because these norms are guiding the market, are guiding the development. It's like to have an ISO 2000 something that you certificate that the technology it's aligned with some quality of standard in a specific subdomain of technology. That is another point. Another point is in relation to the legal instrument that is lacking in most of part of the globe. Because at some point we need to point the finger and ascribe some sanctions to manufacturer, to the developer of the system, to the government that adopt. And also we need to empower the government, because the government do not understand the technology. So how you can create some legislation without knowing all the potential implication of technology in people's lives. So we have different levels. So we have the level of civil society. They be very aware that they cannot provide all kind of information, because at some point that could be seen as a kind of servitude to access the benefit of access the service. We need to create soft laws, we need to create hard law, we need to establish international cooperation, because technology has no borders. That is very important point. Some company cause potential harms and another company, but how you can sue the company? That is very difficult. So it's not an easy question, but fortunately we have several international efforts to create this, the education content, to create some due diligence mechanism to capacity government, capacity population, to create a legal instrument, cooperation, and so on. But it's not an easy answer. There is no easy answer. But you are moving, positively.
Great. Thank you, Edson. Thank you. Eurídice, ¿qué piensas en cómo esto, no? Si la tecnología, la pregunta que ha hecho José Antonio, que ahora lo veo en antena, ahí en el iconito este.
Pienso un poco lo que terminaba diciendo en la presentación, ¿no? Que las tecnologías, pues sí, pueden ser buenas, pueden ser malas, pero más bien tenemos que preguntarnos a los intereses de quien responden, ¿no? Porque no podemos estar esperando que la regulación nos esté salvando de nuestras prácticas de uso. Es decir, la regulación habitualmente llega muy tarde, llega cuando el problema se ha dado. Cuando llegó el escándalo de Cambridge Analytica y ya había habido unas elecciones que se habían visto afectadas, es cuando empezamos a pensar cómo vamos a regular. Es muy difícil, además, cuando hablamos de empresas transnacionales, establecer regulaciones locales, nacionales, o imaginemos cómo va a regular una regulación europea, Facebook o, no sé, Amazon, cuando, pues sí, Amazon o Facebook pueden decir que están cumpliendo las normativas, pero no podemos entrar a sus cajas negras para asegurar y garantizar que eso está siendo así, ¿no? Entonces, las regulaciones tienen muchos límites. Hay que, evidentemente, avanzar mucho en ese aspecto también, pero no podemos quedarnos ahí, no podemos pensar que una norma nos va a salvar. Tenemos que decidir qué tecnologías usamos y cuáles no. Yo, por ejemplo, no uso móvil, no tengo teléfono móvil, pero soy una persona que trabaja con tecnologías. No es decir, hay que ser totalmente antitecnológico o protecnológico, sino analizar cada tecnología que estamos utilizando y hacernos esa pregunta a los intereses de quien responden. Y tenemos que garantizar y luchar por esta creación de infraestructura pública, porque solo cuando la tecnología que estemos utilizando sea pública, sea abierta, auditable, podamos ver cómo está, entonces efectivamente y evidentemente podremos asegurarnos de que esos derechos humanos se están garantizando dentro de ese espacio. ¿Está silenciada?
No sabía, sí. Ahora. No sabía que no tenías teléfono móvil. ¡Qué moderna! Muchas gracias. Thank you all of you. Nuria nos ha hecho también una pregunta que creo que es colectiva. Y yo creo que está hablando de una cosa que me parece súper interesante, y yo también tenía unas preguntillas así al lado para ver si... Dice, ¿pero podemos confiar en las leyes para asegurar nuestros derechos? Siendo que estos derechos, de momento, están en manos privadas, a diferencia de los derechos más tradicionales que dependían más del sistema público. Y viendo que todos los organismos actuales de protección y vigilancia, bueno, todo lo que hay, no tenemos garantías, ¿debemos buscar nuevos sistemas? ¿Cómo habéis planteado? Nuria, aquí te voy a pedir que entres, porque no sé si...
Hola,
¿Cómo
no,
lo habéis...?
no muy
Sí.
bien.
Vale, no sé si la pregunta final lleva acento, ¿sabes? ¿Cómo lo habéis planteado?
No, porque era muy, o sea, bueno, iba mucho por la reflexión que estaba haciendo hace un momento Eurídice. No sé si he dicho bien el nombre, perdona.
Sí, sí.
Vale.
Yo creo que lo que en parte también está diciendo Nuria, y aquí también abro la pregunta para los tres ponentes y panelistas, es, vivimos un Internet privado. Internet se ha creado por empresas. El Internet Governance Forum últimamente pues, está hablando de más temas como la violencia de género online, etcétera, etcétera. Se está hablando del hate speech, etcétera. Pero ¿cómo? Y luego ahora también Edson acaba de hablar de, podemos regularlo, y lo mismo también el profesor Cannataci, no podemos regularlo, pero ojo, porque ¿qué regulamos? ¿A qué nivel? ¿Qué ámbitos? O sea, ¿cómo sabemos que no estamos superlimitando con esta regulación el potencial bueno, ¿no? Esto es muy complicado de ver, pero a mí lo que más me interesa también es, a través de todas estas recomendaciones que las United Nations hacen o que la UNESCO hace, ¿no? Cómo están ellos viendo que al menos los países que están más preparados para asimilar estas recomendaciones las van a implementar en nuestros sistemas jurídicos o en nuestros sistemas normativos, que en parte es un poco lo que también la pregunta que haces, ¿no, Nuria? Es una pregunta a los tres, ¿no? ¿Cómo lo veis esto? ¿Cómo, por vuestra experiencia y visión, cómo creéis que puede ser esta dinámica de traspasar las recomendaciones de organismos internacionales a las legislaciones nacionales, ¿no? Esto es lo que veo complicado, yo personalmente, no sé cómo lo veis.
Contesto yo, que voy a ser muy rápida. Sí, a todo lo que comentaba en la pregunta. Sí, necesitamos generar estructuras propias, porque el tratar de arreglar todo el lío que ya hay con las que tenemos, pues va a ser más complicado que tirar todo el edificio de naipes y empezar uno nuevo. Entonces, mi respuesta solo es sí.
Edson or Mr. Cannataci?
In relation to this,
I will let Edson go first and comment myself.
okay. Thank you so much. In relation to this legislation or these recommendations or these national efforts, as you know, I'm involved in some of these efforts, and we try to create some what you used to say backbone, where this backbone is not general, but not so specific, where you can instantiate our legislation or our recommendation to the local government without affect negatively the sovereignty. So that's the reason some of the policy action are a bit general, because you are saying, okay, you need to implement this, we need to act in this way, but not you do not provide the specificity, because that could not be accepted in a negotiation. Another point is in relation to the human rights in the digital age. It's necessary that you need a deeper reflection about how the human rights impact how the digital technology impact the human rights in the local community. We do not understand clearly this. That is very important, because all the legislation should be grounded on human rights. And that could be a kind of compass. If you have this translation, as I can see, this translation of human rights to the digital age, to try to understand how the technology impacts in all aspects of life. That would be the source or the foundation for the elaboration for public ground, the public policies. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Perhaps if I come in on this, I think you will not be surprised to hear somebody whose one of job titles is professor of technology law, to talk about the need for technology law, right? The law must regulate technology in a way that the human rights in society are properly protected, while obviously enabling the maximum benefit to be obtained from the technology. However, I think we should be clear that technology is a very wide area. You go from cybercrime, which is the area of criminal law, to privacy, which is more in the area of human rights and constitutional law. We go to ID management. We go to the law regulating AI. And there are many, many other subjects. There are intellectual property rights in technology law, etc. So there are many dimensions. However, I think we should also reflect about the need for both a bottom-up approach and a top-down approach. When it comes to the UN has many virtues. It's possibly one of the best ideas that man has ever had, after the wheel and a few other inventions. But the truth of the matter is the UN is a very slow institution, right? It takes anything between an average of 17 to 27 years to produce a piece of international law around which there is international agreement. So while not giving up on the UN coming up with agreements, we must also use those agreements we already have, right? So do we have a law which covers privacy and which is modern? Yes. There is Convention 108, which is modernized even to take into account AI and other issues. So we have 55 countries of the world which are signed up to Convention 108. We have 70 countries in the world which participate in the discussions about Convention 108. So it is not as if we don't have hope or we don't know what to do, right? We already have a lot, more than 40 years of experience of regulating privacy law and data protection law internationally. So we must also think, however, that law is not the only answer. We cannot forget the importance of policy and policies, especially which implement education. I think that one of the most important things that governments have to do, in addition to the laws are important, but the laws are not the only thing. The laws imposing the requirements for technological protection as opposed to legal protection are very important. The principles of privacy by design and privacy by default are very important. One of the major problems I find across the world is that there are not enough chairs of privacy engineering. There are a lot of engineering professors, but not a lot of privacy engineering, which is a big problem. However, the most important thing is education, right? And when I talk about education, I know it is controversial, for example, to talk about sex education for children, and in some countries they tell you they should start at 7 years, and in some countries they should start at 9 years, and when those countries which start at 12 or 14 years, they tell them rubbish, because at 12, 14 years the children don't want to listen to you. They are going to teach you about sex rather than you tell them. But in reality, why I'm talking about this? Because in reality, digital education and how to be a digital citizen and a citizen online is at least as important, if not more important, than sex education. Because kids are starting off using devices the minute they start their hands. Have you ever seen a child go to a computer which is not touch sensitive, but they go and swipe it with their finger because they think that everything is a touch screen? Children need to be properly educated how to be properly online citizens. So they understand the extent to which information is being manipulated. They understand the extent to which the information they are receiving is manipulated. Of course, there's freedom of information, but in reality, people are trying to use the electronic media in order to manipulate thinking, either when it comes to commercial decisions, what people are going to buy, or political decisions, who people are going to vote for. And children have got to be started, educated about that from day one, from the age of 4 or 5 or whatever age you want. And so that as they enter into the electronic age, they are able to take decisions in as autonomous a manner as possible. There is always going to be influence, but at least they can be aware. And when it comes to self-determination and the free development of their personality, they can do that in a manner which is minimally impacted as possible by those people who want to manipulate them. Thank you.
Great. There is Arkady Pomar was already talking about education, as you just mentioned, which is great because I can see a match here. And Arkady was mentioning that education as a fundamental pillar of how creating, as you said, digital citizens. But who is going to? My question is related to Arkady's question to you. So who is enabled to educate young citizens? Who knows so much about technology, digital landscapes, and humanities or humanities sciences? No, this is what Arkady was mentioning, and I think I agree. I don't think technology is an engineering matter. Writing code is related to many current and daily issues, so probably there's a merge here. So what would your point be on here? Like, who can educate young citizens today, or do we have to wait until the young how do you call native digital kids become adults that are already aware of the dark side? What do you think about this?
The good news, Thais, is that there are already a lot of efforts at developing curricula, regular curricula that can be used in schools on the education of children in about privacy, about freedom of expression, about being digital citizens. Some of these curricula have been experimented with even in countries like Uruguay and other countries, in Spanish-speaking countries too. So we basically need to make sure that we develop the curricula, we provide the resources, including teachers, that in teacher training colleges in education, in faculties of education around the world, you produce teachers not only of Spanish and French and mathematics and English, but also of technology and technology-related matters. So I think that that is a clear way forward, but you need the political will, you need the clarity. Once you have the political will to do so, then you would be able to find the resources to train the teachers, etc. Yes, I mean, developing the curricula can be done or has already been done in some countries, but putting the teachers out there, it shouldn't take longer than 3 to 5 years. And even then, we're probably too late. We don't want to miss out on things. But it is especially teachers, first at primary school level and then at secondary school level, which need to be able to do the right kind of teaching. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that someone was asking, and I think this is related again to your words, Dr. Cannataci. It is about the free software movement, and how Natalie was asking to all the panelists what is your view about it? How can the free software movement be important for this transparency and accountability? And Eurídice, she was talking about education and free software, right? I don't know, Eurídice, do you want to answer this question?
Estaba escribiendo ya por el chat porque Entonces, no te escuché bien al final porque estaba pasándoles el enlace de los recursos. Si me la repites, perdón.
Sí, no, era una pregunta que estaba relacionado con la pregunta que hacía Natalie, ¿no? Y decía que, bueno, eso, que había la privacidad y el movimiento del software libre, pues parece como una salida a este lío que tenemos, ¿no? Y el hecho de ser... no sé por qué me digo en audio, el hecho de ser transparente, ¿no? O de permitir una accountability mayor, pues es una garantía. Entonces, como tú estabas hablando de la educación y del software libre, creo que te va a gustar contestar esta pregunta. Y a propósito de lo que decía el doctor Cannataci, esa capacitación digital, al menos Cataluña y en Valencia, en España, muchos gobiernos están cediendo a precisamente el software privativo. Entonces, te paso la palabra.
Gracias. Sí, o sea, es un problema porque aunque eduquemos a niños y niñas en ser conscientes de los riesgos digitales, en ser capaces de desarrollar sus propias tecnologías, si lo estamos haciendo, por ejemplo, a través de Zoom, pues igual ya están generando como esos perfiles de datos que van a limitar sus opciones futuras. Entonces, creo que sí es muy, muy importante esa infraestructura pública. Poco a poco, en ratos libres, porque es un proyecto como digamos personal de varias personas y sin financiación ni nada, hemos generado un sistema para scrapear el BOE, como todos los contratos que existen a este nivel. Entonces, entre Aitor Jiménez, Caix Cancela y Mario Rodotera, pues hemos rastreado ya 20 años del Boletín Oficial del Estado, donde podemos ver todos los contratos con empresas privadas para infraestructura pública. Entonces se puede ver que hay miles de millones de euros invertidos en pagar servidores de Amazon, tecnologías, infraestructuras digitales privadas que además están lucrando con los datos de la ciudadanía, que además están en otros países exponiendo y vulnerando también la información de toda la ciudadanía y la información de un país que está en manos de otro que en cualquier momento puede decidir auditar o revisar esa empresa. Y lo que hemos visto es que con esa gran cantidad, porque muchas veces se dice no podemos generar una infraestructura pública digital porque es muy caro. No es cierto. Con los miles de millones de euros que se han invertido solo en España en pagar empresas privadas cuyos intereses son comerciales y que están exponiéndonos y nos están poniendo en riesgo, podríamos haber generado una estructura propia, segura, estable, generado empleo y tener ser punteros en la creación, porque no podemos ir a la zaga cuando dejamos que otros sean los punteros en la innovación tecnológica y nosotros solo estamos viendo cómo vamos a regular e impedir que esa tecnología nos fastidie. Tenemos que ser, a partir de estas infraestructuras públicas, que nos estemos generando eso. Y vale para la educación, y vale para la sanidad, vale para la defensa, vale para todos los sectores públicos que actualmente están siendo privatizados de una forma encubierta.
Esto enlaza con tu pregunta acerca de el servidor o el cloud europeo, Gaia X, ¿no? And this is a question for Edson and for Mr. Cannataci. Do you know about this cloud, this European cloud, alternative to what Eurídice is saying? I think that you're talking about one of the manifestations of digital colonialism in terms of Renata Ávila. This is what Renata would say. I don't know. Do you know, dear panelists, about this initiative?
No.
Do you want to go first on this?
Sorry? Because I read it yesterday, but I didn't have time to research. But it's supposed to be a new cloud, but decentralized, but with different protocols that allow all to be connected. And sounds great to me, but I didn't have really time to research it. It was just in the case you already knew about that and can explain me a bit more about it.
Well, I have seen a number of proposals about so-called European cloud to compete with other clouds. But you have to look at also the notion of how cloud computing works and the extent to which you have distributed processing and decentralization. So there is always going to be the discussion of who owns these data centers which are handling the cloud. And from a legal and human rights point of view, the extent to which we have data localization or not, whether one supports the notion of data localization, which unfortunately is very often used by some countries as a weapon against their own citizens. So one of the reasons that we will have possibly increasing moves towards not only European clouds, but other clouds all over the world is precisely because of the question of jurisdiction. There is as yet no international agreement over jurisdiction when it comes to cloud computing and what happens in centers outside one's territorial jurisdiction. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that I'm going to have to say goodbye because I'm already late for my next meeting, which started 8 minutes ago. Can I just say what a pleasure it has been to spend these 2 hours with you, and I'm looking forward to next time in order to continue the discussion. Take care and have a nice evening.
Thank you very much. Ciao, ciao. Well, so we can continue with some questions that I have here for Edson, for Mr. Edson Prestes, which are from Christina, and she was asking you, in which ways are the recommendations that you have been working with UNESCO and the IEEE association, standard association, be compelling, or be how it is kind of the same question we made you before, like how can we make this applicable? What would you think the processes should be? I don't know, like I'm going to say a very basic thing, no? We had a human rights declaration and everyone agreed. Mr. Cannataci has already said to us the years that the international community needs to agree on a subject, but because we are in a hurry, I would say, how can we make these recommendations applicable in a, and I wouldn't say in a rush, but in a not a slow motion mood or timing?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Because, for instance, if you consider the IEEE work, the ethically aligned design, I believe this document is a milestone in this domain, because 5 years or six years ago, no one's talked in so deep way the ethics of artificial intelligence. So it was a American work to bring to the table a lot of experts to discuss in the different under the different perspective the artificial intelligence. So at that moment we have in this document a set of principles, but how you can move from principle to actions. One of the steps that you are pursuing is the elaboration of soft laws. So elaborate a soft law demands around 4 years activity in the working group. Like my working group, I spent 4 years to create a soft law in the format of a technical norm, but they are soft law only. For the UNESCO recommendation, we work based on the discussion that are happening in different parts of the globe, like the discussion in the IEEE, the discussion in high-level panel, in the European Commission, and so on, OECD. And we have this recommendation, but to move this recommendation that are very high level to recommendation that are practical in the government, that is depend on the government. And at that moment, you are in a very nice position because we are seeing some efforts to create a national plan on artificial intelligence. Like we have some countries that already have these national plans, and to make an alignment of this plan with our recommendation is like straightforward. They already know in the global sense what is necessary to implement artificial intelligence or to create an ecosystem for artificial intelligence. And I'm talking about my country, my whole country, Brazil, that released the strategic plan for artificial intelligence this week. But observe that this plan, it's a bit limited because it was not elaborated by an interdisciplinary group that is demanded by a plan in this level. So to make that alignment of this recommendation with the national plan, I think is straightforward, but that depends on the government. That is very important, interesting, because if you think in the current situation in the world, we have a race to dominate the artificial intelligence. But why you have so many countries lagging behind or not preparing themselves to the AI age? Why? Why not? They are not prohibited to invest in education, invest in infrastructure. Everyone has money to invest in education, invest in infrastructure. Like in Brazil, we have a weak infrastructure. We do not have a strong education. But why the government is still are unprepared for this generation? Sincerely, I do not know. But I believe the more the companies, the more the superpowers, or the high level, the high income countries start to adopt the recommendation or strategic plan and incorporate the legislation in the transnational companies, we were forced to adopt some kind of regulation in country, like what's happened with the GDPR. A lot of transnational companies that are placed in Brazil, based in Brazil, that are some headquartered in Europe, in US, demanded the government to adopt data protection and privacy regulation here. So it's like an interference from other country in the current country. I believe that we make the government move faster, but I cannot guarantee. I cannot, sincerely, I cannot guarantee. It's necessary to change the mindset of the government, of the company, of the civil society, because you are trying to regulate very rich environment that can make a lot of money. And company, government don't want to lose the control of the data. So it's difficult. It's difficult to make a balance or to push forward.
So Carolina is asking if you can share with us your the report about the sustainable the CDGs. I don't know if in English it's like this. The ODCs and robotics and artificial intelligence. At the beginning of your presentation, you were talking about if you're interested, you can. Yes, we are all interested. We want you to share this recommendation. So if you can please give Diana access to that, she will be able to share this with the group. I have here another question for you. That I think it was. Let me see. It was Sandra. And Cristina, no, and she was talking. They were talking. Cristina was talking about big data and legislation, and how can we make make big companies comply and agree what the law enables them to do or not to do? Because I mean, there is this, I guess that she's asking this because there is this lack of accountability and transparency on many of the technology software pieces, right? I think that Dr. Cannataci was talking about this before, like, and also the other question. Well, this is the first question Christina is asking. So, how can we make it is the same kind of question now applied to big data? So, how can we make big data ruled and make companies be accountable? Like, what are the mechanisms that the systems can create, the public system, the law, the states can build in order to make this the use of big data more, I'm not sure if we have to use the word restrictive, but accountable at least, right? What are the mechanisms that you think that are working better or should be applied to improve the accountability of this? This is a question for you, Edson.
Okay, I'm sorry for that. So that's a very, very interesting question. At that moment, it is not clear to me because I do not have legal formation. But first of all, what we need to do is to try to identify who is responsible, who is accountable. That is not so easy, because first you need to understand the life cycle of the development of AI system. Even in the case of big data, who is collecting, what tools are being used, what are the outputs produced that you have an impact on the society. So it's necessary to understand the life cycle and also understand what is the contribution of all actors to a potential issue. That is something that are being discussed today in the technical community. That is not clear because we have a shared responsibility. We cannot simply point the finger for just one person or just one company and say this person or the company should hold the total responsibility. Because we will have someone that manufacture the system, adopt the system, use in scale the system. So we can some person in the civil society to the government could be responsible. So it's not possible at that moment because we have some gaps in how you can distribute the responsibility, and even which kind of responsibility. Some government try to ascribe responsibility to the system, to the machines, and not to the person or to the company. So it's a huge gap. I remember in one of the discussion in the ad hoc expert group, some in all the public consultation, we have some people that argue that we need to ascribe responsibility to the system because the system can create other systems. And while the others say, oh, no, that's not possible. The responsibility should lie only in humans. So we have a huge division. But after deciding who should ascribe responsibility, you can use the human rights instrument and international law instruments to define sanctions. So, but sincerely, I do not know how we can do that at a global scale. I do not know. Sincerely, I do not know. You mentioned about the Internet Governance Forum. Yeah, we try to. One of our proposals was to reform the Internet Governance Forum. I'm not sure if you heard about the IGF Plus. It's an extension of the Governance Forum. Instead of only discuss issues, we could also try to draft policies, draft legislation, try to identify risks, and try to debate this risk and how to mitigate this risk. It's like a use committee that you try to find ways to manage the risks.
I think it's super interesting.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That was one of our proposals in the high-level panel on digital cooperation. Try to reform the IGF.
I'm going to ask you a very short question. Are you optimistic about AI or pessimistic?
Part of me, half of me is I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic by nature, okay? Because I can clearly, if I put the artificial intelligence or technological domain in the center, I can see, okay, the people should be read to the digital wage if you have a strong education, if you have a very good infrastructure, if you have access to the internet, law, taxations, regulation, and so on. So let's move in that direction to implement each of them. But you understand that some countries do not care about the population itself. The policy do not have the citizens in the center. And that make me very no optimistic. Okay, so because of that, not because the technology, everything around it, because I can, like in the robotic domain, I can use robots to save people in the disaster situation, to help people in the hospital, make more precise surgery, create new companies, new business, improve agriculture, a lot of benefit. However, the problem lies on humans, how they want to do, what they intend to do with the technology. They are putting the human in the center of the development or not. So half I'm optimistic, half I'm not optimistic. Sometimes money talk louder.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sometimes money is messing around. Yes. Thank you very much. Eurídice, ahora tenemos unas preguntas para ti que nos han hecho Nuria y pregunta sobre Uncensored Library. Dice que es un gran proyecto, muy nuevo, y te pregunta si crees que resistirá, teniendo en cuenta todo lo que puede suponer para los grandes poderes del mundo y viendo cómo han evolucionado los casos de grandes informaciones comprometidas.
Pues la verdad no tengo modo de saberlo. Espero que sí, pero no sé si sobreviva y por cuánto.
Yo tengo también otra pregunta por aquí, que es ¿por qué crees tú que un procomún digital debería ser considerado como un derecho básico digital también?
Porque el resto de derechos están en juego si no garantizamos la infraestructura. O sea, por ejemplo, el caso de la educación es claro. Si no garantizamos una infraestructura pública digital, no podemos garantizar la educación. Y de ahí se abren todos los demás derechos. Es decir, igual sucede con la sanidad, igual sucede con un montón de derechos. Se ha visto, justo también Edson hablaba de los sesgos de la inteligencia artificial, pues todos estos sesgos que especialmente son más difíciles de investigar cuando los algoritmos son cerrados, porque hay que ir a las entradas y las salidas y no podemos verlos, pueden llegar a causar muertes de personas. O sea, no hablamos solo de cuestiones de derechos digitales, hablamos de cuestiones como el derecho a la vida, o sea, no morir por no ser atendido por una emergencia médica. Entonces, si no podemos garantizar que hay estas infraestructuras que no estén regidas por esos intereses comerciales, que es lo que principalmente genera esos sesgos, entonces no podemos garantizar otros derechos humanos. Y se supone que los derechos humanos deben estar garantizados.
Vale, muchas gracias. Pues, a ver, no sé si me he dejado alguna pregunta de alguien que creo que es la última oportunidad, last call, para hacer las últimas preguntas a nuestros panelistas. A ver, así sí, Aida nos pregunta, para Edson, it is clear that artificial intelligence is an advance for society, but taking into account the environment, is there any alternative to the creation or reuse that can be sustainable? About the artificial intelligence she's talking. Well, I'm going to say it in Spanish because I'm getting nervous. My kid is going to open the door in a minute and I am freaking out. Sorry. Tiro de traducción, sino, ya que al final la materia prima es finita y los desechos electrónicos pueden llegar a no degradarse jamás. ¿Qué pasará cuando se acaben estos materiales? ¿Qué papel tiene la reutilización y el reciclaje en este tema? ¿Y cómo la inteligencia artificial puede afectarnos?
Yes, that's possible. That's possible, certainly possible. There is some domains like in terms of computer science, computational green, that intend to reuse the materials that are used to the development of the computational system. So, like a kind of a circular research. That's a point. Another point is try to work in the algorithm scale, try to minimize the complexity of these algorithms. Instead of have an algorithm that is very costly in terms of time of processing, you could try to investigate new ways to minimize this complexity that will impact on the energy, that will impact in the advancement of the computer itself. But there is a domain that discusses how to make this development sustainable.
Great. So there's another question, but I'm not really sure who can answer it. And I'm not really sure if it's related to the subject we are talking, which is Wally asking about the negative effects about, or the effects about kids and, I don't know the word in English, coltran in Congo. I mean, the material, right? I'm not really sure if Edson or Eurídice can answer this question, because I think it's, I don't know if it's out of topic a little bit. But to be democratic, I'm giving the voice to everyone, because everyone has got the right? So feel free to say if you can answer this or not. I mean,
I introduced the subject, so it's not that
okay, es que me lo perdí esto. Esto me lo he perdido. Vale.
And I actually reply in the chat that there is a complaint by international rights advocates and the families of the child in the Congo to Apple, Amazon, Google, Tesla, and 45 more companies. But this complaint is from 2017, and I'm not sure how it's going, or if it's already gone, or I don't have any idea of how this complaint is going.
Okay, pues my respects to Wally, because I missed part of the presentation for Eurídice, and I was not aware that she talked about this issue. Sorry. And the last question is from Carolina about the negative effects that Estonian case can represent regarding the digital government and digital citizenship and the whole digital policy, and that the holistic one they are applying. Are there any comments from our panelists on this?
That is very, very interesting, because Estonia is very digital. I remember one of the discussion in the high-level panel that you have the presence of some high representatives from Estonia, Norway. One of the discussion, it was about a digital ID. Digital ID for Estonia, from Finland, Norway, works perfectly because all the policies are citizen-oriented. But if you are considering some countries in the global south or some pseudo-democratic countries, that could pose a lot of risk for the human rights, because the government could use this information to track and monitor some communities inside the country. That is very pretty dangerous. Like if a government do not accept sexual identity or some political view, they could track these people and could deny some services. That is, this advancement that is very good. Some countries could have a negative effect in others. In digital identification, digital ID is one of them.
Personalmente me preocupa que nos obliguen a tener ciertas tecnologías o ciertos dispositivos. Es decir, que si se implementa esto, por ejemplo, el uso del teléfono móvil sea imprescindible, porque sea el soporte que permite tener toda esa información. Actualmente ya hay muchos problemas, muchos sistemas como que te exigen tener un móvil para hacer la declaración en la Hacienda. Actualmente los bancos para casi todas las operaciones ya están pasando a formatos que exigen que tengas un teléfono móvil, que además están ahora como nueva política exigiendo que tengas habilitado la geolocalización. Entonces, quizá evidentemente el problema de que los gobiernos puedan hacer seguimientos a ciertos colectivos es un problema, pero también está el problema de que las empresas puedan hacer ese seguimiento a ese cierto tipo de colectivos, que ya está sucediendo y que puede suceder como todavía también más, dependiendo también, porque no solo es cuestión de software, sino el del propio hardware. Si tú tienes un teléfono que es estadounidense y que ha sido hecho siguiendo sus normas, o que es chino y que ha sido hecho siguiendo sus normas, lo que tú pongas ahí también pueden tener acceso, porque hay cuestiones que pueden estar dentro del propio software, los generadores de los propios dispositivos, ¿no? Entonces, si de pronto ya nos obligan a tener ciertos dispositivos, también se está dando como esta balcanización del Internet, donde si accedes desde Apple tienes unos ciertos contenidos, si accedes desde Android tienes otros ciertos contenidos, y todo depende también del dispositivo que tengas, ¿no? Por ahí va más mi terror, que se nos obligue a comprar algo que además se queda obsoleto al año. Entonces, bueno, no sé.
Es tremendo, sí, sí. Bueno, pues el momento ha llegado de despedirnos. Ha sido una mesa fantástica. Yo he aprendido un montón. Espero que la audiencia también. Muchas gracias, doctor Edson Prestes. Muchas gracias, doctora Eurídice Cabañas. Y bueno, pues seguimos en contacto y aprendiendo, y yo me voy a leer todas las presentaciones estas tan interesantes con todos los links para seguir aprendiendo. Muchas gracias a todas, a todos y a todes. Un saludo.
Muchas gracias a todas y a todos. A Cannataci, que nos ha tenido que dejar antes, a Edson, a Eurídice y a Thais por vuestra intervención, atención, tiempo, colaboración. Ha sido súper interesante todo lo que habéis expuesto. Agradecer también en particular a Eurídice, que hoy ha hecho una excepción para estar presente en la sesión e intervenir usando el Zoom. Gracias. Y bueno, antes de desconectaros, quería hacer unos apuntes más temas del aula, y hoy que finalizamos el módulo 1, pues para aquellas que solo vais a realizar este módulo primero, tendréis unos 10 días más el aula, la plataforma abierta, tiempo en el que podréis descargaros aquellos materiales que deseáis. Y bueno, para el resto de compañeras, recordar que el lunes seguiremos con más, entrando ya en módulo 2 sobre medio ambiente y derechos humanos. Y a partir de mañana también las personas que solo habéis hecho este módulo 1 tendréis los certificados subidos en el apartado de Secretaría del aula. Creo que no me dejo nada más, igual por mensaje vamos a ir hablando. Y bueno, gracias a todas como participantes también, ha sido un placer compartir de nuevo este espacio en la primera semana. Y bueno, buen fin de semana y hasta el lunes. Gracias.
Adiós, buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Adiós, gracias.
Bye.
Adiós, gracias.
Saludos
Gracias.
a todos.